Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Janice R. Love, also known as the First Lady Coach, and I equip seasoned pastors' wives to have the clarity, the confidence, and the courage to walk boldly into the destiny for which she was chosen by being perfectly who God created her to be. All right, let's let's go ahead and get started. So, tonight, we are going to be talking about what I learned from my great grandmother I never met. Now, unfortunately, my great grandmother, I never had a chance to meet. But as I introduce you to her here in a few moments, you'll kind of see how she has influenced my life in so many ways. Not just what I do now, but how I do things and my determination about doing things. So let's go ahead and get started, where I can tell you the lessons that I learned from my great grandmother that I never got a chance to meet. So, first of all, let me introduce you to my great grandmother. This is my great grandmother. Meet my great grandmother, Helen, who my mother is actually named after her because that was her name as well. But if you look closely at this picture, you'll see that I resemble my great grandmother. In fact, I've had uncles to tell me that you look just like great grandma. And I'm hoping they were saying when she was much younger, right? Okay. But anyway, this is my great grandmother. And again, her name is Helen. And she was born in the year 1877. Okay. Now, let me introduce you to her husband as well. I just love showing these family pictures. They're not the greatest pictures in the world, but realize she was born in 1877. Okay. All right. So I want you to meet my great grandfather. This is my great grandfather, John. Now, if you happen to know me, and well, let me say this, you all. First of all, my great grandmother had good taste in men because my great grandfather is a good looking man. But if you know anything about me, if you've been part of around my family or anything, you know that my mother's name is Helen and that my father's name was John, just like my great grandparents. Isn't that wonderful? That's Black history in itself, that my mom would go on to marry someone the same name as her grandfather, and that my dad would marry a woman named Helen. It's just I just get excited about it. You all might not be excited about it, but I am. Anyway, but she had great taste in men, didn't she? All right. So let me show you also a picture of them at their home. And again, not the greatest pictures in the world, but hopefully you can see a little bit. They had a home, and you can see that they had some children. Okay. And those children, they had 5 daughters. And let me show you what those daughters looked like when they were all grown up. Look at those divas. This was my grandmother and my 3 of my great aunties. One is not pictured here. But again, I get excited just because I do have access to these pictures. I had an uncle who actually wrote a book about my family, and it's called A History of the Waters, Burdell, and Fassett Families. And I am just so thankful that my uncle took the time to research our family history and write about it. And in fact, my kids are included in that as well. So let's really get into the 3 things that I really learned from my grandmother, the one I never even met. So the first thing I do want to tell you about my grandparents, my great grandfather was a minister in the Methodist Church, okay, which made my great grandmother a first lady. So again, so many things that we have in common. And I am just, again, excited that my family shared the stories about her. Okay, so the first thing I want to share with you that I learned from my great grandmother that I never met was to invest in young people. So my great grandparents, the story is told that my great grandfather helped more people, more young people to go to college than anyone else in the area of Virginia where they lived. They lived in Maryland, they lived in North Carolina, they lived in Virginia. But my great grandfather was responsible for sending more people to college than anyone else. In fact, they quoted it in a newspaper about how determined he was to help others. So when I talk about investing in young people, I've always heard that we should leave we should leave something better for the generation that comes behind us. And that's exactly what my great grandparents did. Now, let me tell you again, not just the fact that they sent other young people to school, but my grandmother, my great grandmother, was not going to let other people end up going to college, and her daughters were not going to college. So there have been stories told that my great grandmother, I keep saying but if I say grandmother, y'all know I'm talking about my great grandmother. Okay. All right. But there are stories about how she made sure that her daughters were going to college too. And because they went to college, my great aunts and even my grandmother, they ended up being professionals who contributed to society. In fact, one of my great aunties actually worked with the NAACP, and she met Thurgood Marshall and worked with him. I have another great auntie who became a nurse, and others teachers. So again, they invested in their children, but not only their children, but they invested in others. And just like we have this opportunity today, not only to invest in our own children, which we do that, but we can also invest in others that they met, whether traveling with the church, because my great grandfather had to manage 3 churches. Okay. So in each one of those churches, he managed to support and help the young people. So that's the thing I learned from my great grandmother and my great grandfather, that we should invest in our young people because they are the future of today, however they say it, right? They are the future tomorrow. They are the ones that we must invest in, not only by helping them to achieve, but also paving the way for them to do things that perhaps we could not do. So my great grandmother never went to college or anything, but because she invested in her own children, that made it possible as it went on generations on down for me to be able to do some of the same things. So that is the very first thing I learned from my great grandmother. So the second thing I learned from my great grandmother was to leverage your position. Now, think about this. Leverage your position. She was in a position being married to a man who was very strategic in sending young people to school and doing other things. So she leveraged her position. When you leverage your position, you realize that you are in a place that you can only do what you can do, or you are the only person that can accomplish certain things. So again, maybe in that day and time, girls perhaps maybe did not go to college, but my great grandmother leveraged her position as not only a first lady, but the wife of the man who was responsible for helping so many other people. And she leveraged her position to make sure that she was able to send her daughters to school as well. Now, think about this in your own life. You are in a position to do things that others cannot do, especially if you are a pastor's wife or whatever role you are in. You have to be able to leverage your position sometime to get things done. Now, there are times when I need to get something done, and I will have to use I will have to leverage my position in order to get those done. So that is something I learned from my great grandmother. And hopefully it can be of assistance or of help to you as you think about the things that only you can do, because you can leverage your position. All right, so that is the second thing I learned from my great grandmother that I never ever met. And then the final thing I learned from my great grandmother, who I never met, is to network and connect. Now, when I talked about my grandfather on the last time I did a live, I talked about the fact that he connected with others in order to be the man that he was and to make such a difference in our community. And this is the same case with my great grandmother. Again, when she sent her daughters off to school, she had to have a place for them to stay, right? They went away from home. She had to have a place for them to stay. So she networked at all these conventions that she attended as the first lady and as a pastor's wife. She networked at these conventions in order that her daughters would have a place to stay as they went off to college. So I too have learned the power of networking and connecting in order to accomplish the things that I have done. That's what I'm doing right now. I am networking and connecting with each of you again so that I can provide information, that I can also support you in this journey. And again, we can only get things done. We can't always get things done just by trying to do them ourselves, right? We have to network and connect with others in order to accomplish the job. And again, I learned that from my great grandmother. Because again, think about the situation that they were in those days and times, back in the early 1900s, raising children, having daughters, and then having daughters that went on to go to college and to accomplish great things. And again, it's all because my great grandmother stepped out on faith and went and made it happen. All right. And sometimes we have to do that too by networking and connecting with others. So those are the three things that I learned from the great grandmother that I never met. So hopefully you have some stories in your own family that you can pass down to the next generation, not only to encourage them, but also to inspire them. And that is what Black history is all about. Not just learning about everybody else, but also learning about what happened in your own family, the strides that they made, the things that they overcame, the blessings that they passed down to the next generation. So again, that has been what I learned from my great grandmother I never met. All right.